Hey everybody, David here, and today I am going to be telling you my top 10 live action Disney films, remakes or adaptions, whichever one you want to pick, because I know one of these movies is not a live action adaptation or a live action remake. It's more of an adaptation. It's using characters that were once animated, but now we're getting to see them in live action. So I'm going to call it top 10 Disney live action adaptions. So there we go. I have 10 movies here. There are a little bit more than 10 out there. If they're not on the list, it's because they definitely were not my favorites. I'll say this: number 10 is definitely one of my least favorite films on here. And let's begin. Number 10, I have Maleficent, based on Sleeping Beauty, the 1959 film. Maleficent was a loser for me. Look, the trailers looked really cool, but when they turned Maleficent good and turned into a very cheesy romantic fantasy film, I was like, I'm done. I didn't hate the movie, I'll say that much. And look, I saw the trailers for the new Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and it looks like it's going to just be the same crap all over again. Just instead of an evil king, now I think it's going to be an evil queen that's twisting Maleficent and trying to push her to the dark side. I'm like, nah, just like Alice in Wonderland, they made a sequel, Alice Through the Looking Glass. I'm just going to ignore this new Maleficent movie. Unless reviews prove me otherwise, if the reviews come out and people are saying, oh my god, this is the Maleficent movie you've been waiting for, maybe I'll check it out, but right now, I am done with this Maleficent. Moving on to number 9, I have Pete's Dragon. This was a surprising little film. I didn't know what to expect because I actually saw the original film of this after I saw this new one, and this new one is a little cute, sweet family film about a little boy and his dragon, and probably better than the original. A lot of these remakes have a tough time trying to top the original because the originals are so good, a lot of them. This one, I seen the original afterwards, and I'll say the original one is not that great. This new one, though, is a nice little sweet family film. It's a little slow at times, but for the most part, I think there's a nice heartwarming film that will get you a little teary by the end of it. So there you go, Pete's Dragon. Moving on to number 8, I have 101 Dalmatians. This is actually the second Disney live-action film that Disney created. The first one was actually in 1994. They did The Jungle Book, but yeah, 1996's 101 Dalmatians starring Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil was the first one. And look, some of the jokes fall a little flat. They tried to copy Home Alone's style of comedy, so it doesn't hit the same way. But for what it's worth, I think it's a pretty nice adaptation to the original animated classic, and I find it a little bit more enjoyable than the ones that didn't make my list. So there you go. But if you're curious about it, I would recommend it. If you really love the original animated film of 101 Dalmatians, check out the live-action version. They set it in modern times, which is fair because the original one was set in the year, at least it looked like that movie came out in the 1960s. So to make it more modern, it was a no-brainer. Like I said, maybe some of the jokes fall a little flat, but hey, it's good for the kiddies. The kiddies won't mind. It's easy jokes for them. But for a family film, I think it's harmless for adults as well. I wouldn't watch this if you're not into kid films, family films. But if you are, yeah, sure, check it out. Moving on to number 7, I have Christopher Robin. This is a good one. This is based off the Winnie the Pooh characters. This is the one that I was hinting at earlier that, okay, it's not really a remake of the original Winnie the Pooh film, but it is using those classic characters and bringing them into the live-action space. And for what it's worth, I think the film it's kind of like Pete's Dragon a little bit, but I really do think the second half of the movie really starts to bring the better jokes, especially when the Winnie the Pooh characters actually start to come into play. I kind of wish we got more of the Pooh characters in our city instead of the 100 Acre Woods. But for what it's worth, I think it's a charming film that really brings back that nostalgia and joy that you enjoy from those characters when you were a kid. So, moving on to my sixth favorite film of these live action adaptations, I have The Lion King. This actually pains me to put it this low on the list because I love the animated classic so much. And look, I enjoyed this movie. The problem with this movie, though, is that it is exactly like the original. And look, some people might love that it's exactly like the original, and that's great. But I do want a little bit of something new to make it stand on its own. Because if you're just going to be an exact copy of what came before you, well then when I look at both of you on the shelf, I'm just going to pick the one that I already loved first because it was there first. All this one adds is like a new layer, a look to it that was never seen before because that kind of technology wasn't available. I mean, it is cool to look at, but cool isn't the only thing that you need. You need to add things entirely new for us to remember you. I feel like this movie is going to be forgotten as the years go by because the animated classic is already this, just slightly better. So, or a lot better. So, with that being said, I love The Lion King. I don't hate this movie, but I do feel that it should have done a lot more to make itself separate from the original Lion King instead of being too similar. So I'm just going to repeat myself if I continue talking about The Lion King. Moving on to number 5, I have Dumbo. This is a movie that actually does do enough to separate itself from the original. In the beginning of the film, there's a lot that mirrors the animated film. They do a lot to really pay tribute to the original animated film, but then the second half of the movie is where it definitely differs, and I actually really like that. And I do really care about the character of Dumbo and where this elephant goes, and I want him to get back to his freaking mother, because damn, how can you separate a baby elephant from his mother? To me, it was a heartwarming film. I know a lot of people are mixed on this one. Some people really like it, like I did, and some people were disappointed with it. Some people don't feel that Tim Burton has gotten his magic back. I disagree with this movie. I think this movie showed me that Tim Burton does have his magic back, and I'm looking forward to whatever he does next now that I'm back on the Tim Burton train. We'll see. Moving on to number 4, I have Cinderella. The Cinderella remake, I know a lot of people really, really enjoy. This is directed by Kenneth Branagh, who some people might know, directed some independent films like Hamlet, but he also directed the first Thor film, so one of the early Avengers Phase 1 films. Yes, I really enjoyed Cinderella a lot, and it's funny because it didn't seem like a type of movie I was going to go see, but when I heard a lot of critics that I like to listen to saying that this movie was actually really charming and really nice, I decided to check it out for myself, and I agreed with them. It was a really well-done film that really captured the magic of the original animated movie. So for that, I ended up enjoying this movie quite a lot, that I was actually really surprised. It put a big smile on my face, and yes, there is a really nice message there about being kind to others, which I think is a message that a lot of people really aren't holding dear to themselves because there's so much hatred in this world, and I think a movie like Cinderella should be watched more, personally. And yeah, it pays tribute to the original animated movie, but it distinguishes itself enough to make it stand on its own, and that's what I really liked about it. It doesn't rely on any of the songs, and you don't always need the songs when the songs don't always need to be there. It is nice when some of the songs from the original animated film find their way in there, but it's not necessary, and this movie is proof of that. So, moving on to number 4, at number 3, I have Beauty and the Beast. I really enjoy this remake. I remember when it was coming out, the trailers were giving me all the feels, just like the Lion King trailers were. But this is a movie that I felt, even though it's similar to the Lion King, because it copies a lot, I do feel it changes up enough to make it stand on its own. And that's what I really appreciated about this movie. I think there's a balance that you can do that can help a film make it feel different without copying it exactly the way the animated movie was. So for that, yes, I'm putting Beauty and the Beast at number 3, which brings me to number 2 for the exact same reasons. Aladdin. I loved Aladdin. I love the original animated version. It is number 2 on my all-time favorite animated films. Now, this movie maybe isn't as great as the original animated film, but I'll say, as a live-action adaptation, I really did feel it practically got there almost spot on. It did a really good job at really adapting these characters, and again, changes enough to the story that in some ways improves upon the original, but obviously it doesn't need to improve upon it that much because the original animated film is such a perfect film on its own right. And all the way up to Will Smith's Genie, I think everything really does a great job at paying tribute but being itself, and that's what I really enjoy. Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin are perfect examples, and I'll even throw Cinderella up there too, and even my number 1. These are perfect examples of movies that find a way to pay enough tribute but also make enough changes to the original, what we loved about them. And so I think that's what Lion King, they went too much at honoring the original. These ones, to me, had the perfect balance of all of them. So moving on to my number 1 favorite Disney live-action adaptation. Here we go. The Jungle Book. 2016's The Jungle Book. This is actually the second remake they did of The Jungle Book, because the first one they did in 1994, where the animals were all real. That's right, they used real-life animals, but you could tell the animals and the humans were all separated from each other, because you never once see any of the actors really interacting on camera with those animals, and if they do, there's like a glass between them or something like that. This movie is the Jungle Book movie we deserve because they're actually talking, the animals are actually more integrated into the story, and it is a true adaptation of the animated classic, which is what I think worked. And this is the movie why we were excited about Jon Favreau going on to direct The Lion King, because we saw how great he did with this movie, that it was giving us so much hype and joy that he was going to do the same thing with The Lion King. But again, he went too much at honoring the original source material rather than trying to make it its own thing at the same time. It's a tricky thing to balance, and so I don't blame him for doing what he did with The Lion King, because it shows that, he knows what he's doing. I think The Lion King was just a little bit more trickier because the original animated film was still so beloved. Well, when you go back and watch the original Jungle Book, it doesn't actually hold up as well as it used to when you were a kid. So I think it was easier trying to top that film and making enough changes to make the new one stand on its own. And this is one of those films that I feel was better than the original animated film. So with that being said, guys, that's my list, my top 10 live-action adaptions. The worst live-action adaptation of all time. I'm going to say it. Now, I didn't watch all of them, but there is one that I did see maybe earlier this year or last year, I can't remember now, that was terrible. It was 102 Dalmatians. Now, I know I seen that a long time ago, back in when it came out, but I didn't remember it, so I went to go revisit it recently, and I can see why I didn't remember it. It really is a terrible film. I'm sure Alice Through the Looking Glass is even worse, from what I've heard. And I think that's all, right? Yeah, maybe. Anyways, with that being said, guys, comment below. Tell me your list of your top 10 live-action Disney adaptions or remakes. Doesn't matter to me. And with that being said, until next time, take care.